The views expressed on the following broadcasts do not necessarily reflect those of KHLT, Take 12 Radio, or our affiliates. The opinions on this show should not be considered as medical, psychological, or professional advice and are those of the host, co-host, and guest. Take 12 Radio and KHLT Recovery Broadcasting are not affiliated with any particular 12-step fellowship.
God is a solution. God, the 12-step.
I like where he's going here.
Helps the community grow, helps us grow. Monty has done a phenomenal job.
And you're talking about taking people through a spiritual process, getting them into recovery.
Thanks, Monty, and thanks for all your support.
We need spirituality to make this thing work long term.
It's an absolute pleasure. He certainly knows a lot of people.
This is one of the places that is about the business of the solution.
And now, broadcasting on location somewhere in the vast expanse of the Pacific Northwest, it's the over-opinionated 12-stepologist, the Monty'man.
That's right. Well, welcome aboard, family. Those of you who are in recovery and some of those of you who maybe you should be, welcome to the Take 12 Recovery Radio Show. And online with me right now, mobile, very mobile, is my co-host, Mr. Matt Brown, interventionist extraordinaire. Where are you driving to, Matt?
I am in downtown Chicago right now. We're just leaving downtown Chicago, headed to O'Hare Airport. Just wrapped up an intervention here. Went very, very well. Wonderful family.
Nice.
Certainly, it's one of those where you kind of walk in and the person's ready. They just needed to know that there was a solution ready for them. And it was a good experience.
Excellent, excellent. And by the way, listeners, let's just get this out of the way right now because I'm so proud of these guys. freedominterventions.com is the website, Matt's website, if you are curious about interventions. Also, intervention on call. You may not need an intervention, or you may need one, but you just really don't know what you're doing or how to go about it. Give these guys a call. And, of course, our favorite podcast, our sister podcast there, the Party Records Podcast at partyrecordspodcast.com. All linked up here at Take 12 Radio. Well, on this episode, we're going to talk about some crazy things, but let's...
Hey, my name is Reagan, and we love our Uncle Monty, but boy, he sure does like to whine a lot.
What? Yeah.
I guess what I'm saying is it's time for Montyman's Weekly Whine.
Yeah, baby.
Yeah, we never get tired of being interrupted for the weekly whine. So I'm going to whine about this, but I'm going to give kudos to the professionals because it's really not their fault. But hospital waiting rooms, oh my word. Oh, yeah. 3 hours for a 30-minute procedure. 3 hours. So I was talking to the nurse, the what do you call it, triage person, right, that first checks you in. She used to work back east. She didn't say where. She goes, minimal time was 15 hours. 15, can you imagine that? 15 hours in a waiting room? And I said, so these movies like, that she like Grey's Anatomy, or Amsterdam or whatever, these medical movies, Chicago MD or whatever, it's like a crazy town in there. Right? I remember Marv Sapella from Hazleton Betty Ford clinics. I asked him one time, is it really that crazy in those places? He goes, absolutely. It really can be, yeah. And which is wild. These people were extremely polite. They were very nice. They put up with so much. And I guess my whine is probably more directed around those of us who are seeking help that just get so irritated. We're blowing up at the poor receptionist. We're not giving them anything but, grief. And it's hard to watch because I know how hard these people are trying to work, especially with all the budget cuts and everything else. So if you find yourself in a hospital waiting room and it seems like it's taking forever, there's probably a good reason. What do you think, Matt?
Well, in the words of my late great grandfather, what is this, communism? It's he had very little patience for things like that, and in a capitalistic society, he felt like everything ought to move at the speed of business, and I get it, like especially in healthcare today, we're understaffed, they're overworked, and you're right, they do deserve all the kudos we can give them. But to all the hospital administrators out there, shame on you.
Yeah, you're sitting back there talking about your golf game with your buddy. Probably aren't doing your best work.
Yeah.
So I have to share this. So yesterday I went in for a cortisone shot in my knee and went through the whole process. It didn't take too long, and I'm sitting there back there waiting for my orthopedic surgeon, who's a great guy. And all of a sudden I hear this alarm go off, and I'm thinking, yeah, I'll bet this is, we're going to have to evacuate and it's going to take forever. And I'm just kind of joking with myself, right? Well, sure enough, here comes the nurse. We have to evacuate.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
So the nurse, she wheeled me out and took me out to the front, and we sat out there for about 20 minutes. It was a drill. And then we went back in, but I thought, oh, yeah. It's inevitable.
Well, I will say this, Monty, that whatever you're doing is working. I know I commented on this privately, in one of the last encounters where we were, together in person, but your ability to be mobile and your physical condition is so much better.
Thank you.
So whatever you're doing, keep it up, brother.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. All right. Well, let's see here. We'll be back right after this.
Uh-oh. I heard a rumor that you're thinking about jumping the social media ship because you're tired of all the character assassination and the fussing and fighting and such. Well, if you're serious about that, but you don't want to lose your connection with our programming, no problem. Simply visit us at take12radio.com and subscribe on any of the major podcasting platforms listed there. And if you want to download our shows for free, click on the Podomatic app. There's no reason to lose your connection with the best in recovery talk and positive music at take12radio.com.
Take me to the river, carry me down. Take me to the river, gotta make it somehow.
Hi, this is Amanda Broadway, and you're listening to take12radio.com with the Monty'man.
Thank you, Amanda. That's the Christian rock group, The Allies, with Take Me to the River. All right, we're going to hear another song. We usually close out with a song, but we're going to play this song as a segue into the topic. The topic is those crazy things we hear in meetings. Are there some? We hear a lot of great stuff. But we're going to pick on a few. I mean, why should today be unlike any other day on the Take 12 Recovery Radio Show? But I want to play this song by Michael Purrington and the Messengers, and it is entitled Sayings on the Wall. Here's Michael.
Don't think, don't drink, easy does it, first things first. All these helpful hints are supposed to kill my thirst. Since I got sober, I lost what was left of my mind. Coming to these meetings and reading these stupid signs. Nothing is so bad that a drink won't make it worse. They never told me sobriety was a blessing and a curse. One day at a time, I'm praying not to fall, going crazy, reading sayings on the wall. We can do together what I cannot do alone. If that's the best that you can do, I should have stayed at home. This too shall pass if I keep it simple. I can stand the pain. But these wonderful cliches are making mush out of my brain. Nothing is so bad that a drink won't make it worse. They never told me sobriety was a blessing and a curse. One day at a time, I'm praying not to fall, going crazy, reading sayings on the wall. Now, I can't say those signs contain intellectual wealth, but they're starting to make sense, even to a smart guy like myself. They're digging deep down to where my stinking thinking lurks. But I still get pissed off when they say, keep coming back, it works. Nothing is so bad that a drink won't make it worse. They never told me sobriety was a blessing and a curse. One day at a time, I'm praying not to fall, going crazy, reading sayings on the wall. One day at a time, I'm praying not to fall, going crazy, reading sayings on the wall.
Mr. Michael Purrington and his group, The Messengers, one of the pioneers of recovery music, Michael and those guys. So he says something in this song. I'm just going to start out with this one. He says, keep coming back, it works. I want to know, in how many meetings do they talk about what it is? What works? Bad coffee and whining about your day? you hear what I'm
That's
saying?
a fair point.
Yeah. I want to know what it is. I was going to meetings, Matt, for probably a good year before anybody told me what the it was.
Yeah, I don't know that I've ever had anybody ask me that question, but I think a lot of people have different ideas for what it is.
Sure.
And when it doesn't work, and they kept coming back, and it didn't work, I guess there's bound to be a little bit of confusion. You bet.
Well, if we're going with, let's say, the mothership, Alcoholics Anonymous, the purpose of those meetings and the purpose of the literature is to help you develop a relationship with a power greater than yourself to help you solve your problem. That's what the it is. And the method for that is the 12-step method within those fellowships. Now, we know there's a lot of other programs and a lot of other organizations that are working very well for people. But if we're talking about the meetings, particularly the 12-step meetings, that's one of them. So I got a whole list of stuff here, and we'll probably run into some duplicates. What's one of your least favorite things that you've heard in a meeting?
Well, and I've heard this not just in meetings, but I've heard this in professional circles too, which bothers me even more, because as professionals, we need to know way better than this. But I had a client even just the other day who's currently, he was just asked to leave a program, an outpatient program, and is now looking to go to an inpatient program. But one of the things that he said, after his relapse was, my therapist told me that relapse is a part of recovery. And I had to stop him right there and say, no. Relapse is a part of addiction.
Amen.
It's not a part of recovery. And anybody that will tell you that it's a part of your recovery is wrong. Now, do people relapse? Sure they do. Should they be made to feel ashamed because they relapse? Absolutely not. But this idea that relapse is a part of recovery, for a guy like me, gives me full license to relapse.
You bet.
Because, hey, that's just part of the journey.
Yeah.
I can go ahead and do this because, don't you know, this is part of the deal. There's going to be relapses, and that's to be expected, and not only expected but excused now, because it's just a part of the deal. And I don't ever want to make anybody feel ashamed if relapse is a part of their story, because for many of us it is. But don't ever let anybody tell you that it's a part of recovery.
Yeah. Where do you think that came from? Who knows, right?
Somebody who liked to relapse? I don't know. Some therapist somewhere who couldn't stay sober? I have no idea. I if I knew where it came from, I would. It's a great question. I can't even fathom where something like that would come from. Maybe a client somewhere, leaving treatment, decided to make that up to make their family feel better. I don't know.
So my sponsor told me that I would hear that term. So I'm just going to warn you right now, you're going to hear this term. And he says, and here's my take on it. Relapse is never a part of recovery until it happens. And he says, and then it can be. But what you do with that is going to determine whether that becomes part of your story as a success story, or, as something from the pulpit at your funeral. So he wanted me to make sure that I understood, no, it is not part of the recovery process in any way, shape, or form.
Well, I like that better because it puts a little bit more of a hopeful spin on the experience than maybe I was doing. I tend to be a little bit more cynical when I hear that, but I like that more hopeful approach to the idea. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
I'll incorporate that.
Okay. Relapse is never part of recovery until it happens.
Yeah.
So here's one. I'm gonna stir some people up here. Religion is for people afraid to go to hell. Spirituality is for people who have already been there. Let me tell you something. You don't know what hell's like. None of us will until the day we spend eternity there. I mean, it really irritates me when I hear that, because then I hear the person's personal story, and if you come even close to what on this side of eternity we might think a hellish experience is, comparably speaking to many, you haven't even scratched the surface. And to make the statement that religion is for people afraid to go to hell, listen, I don't consider myself a religious person in the negative sense of the word. I consider myself a person who has a relationship with God. And I'm not afraid to go to hell. I know exactly where I'm going. I haven't found that yet in any of the recovery literature I have read either. Have you?
I have not. And I'm just, it's, at least for those of us, like you're saying, none of us have experienced that. So it's a very relative term as well. Yeah. Like I can think of clients that I've worked with where, families have had to implement boundaries. And it's like, I can't believe that I've been cut off from my trust fund. I'm going through hell.
Yeah, right.
It's like, while there's a guy on the sidewalk, it's like, yeah, well, you know what? I'm digging through a garbage can to find something to eat tonight, buddy. So, your version of hell and my version of hell may be very, very different.
Yeah. I remember a guy coming into, we met, my 12-step group years ago, met in a little Girl Scout hut up in Sweet Home, Oregon. And there was probably, if everybody was there that claimed to be a member of that group, there'd probably be 24. I think this evening, it was about 12 people. And this guy comes in, he's got a bag of clothes and a sleeping bag. And people were sharing, and he finally piped up, and man, was he talking about a whine. He was just going on, all I got is a bag of clothes and a sleeping bag. And my sponsor piped up and said, you got a bag of clothes and a sleeping bag? Oh, that's awesome, dude. What's another one, bud?
Well, I'm just thinking back. I had a bag of clothes and a sleeping bag and a truck to sleep in at one point. My situation was even better. Yeah. I thought I was going through hell. The other one that I hear a lot is fake it till you make it.
Oh, yeah. I hate that.
I hate that saying. Fake it until you make it. Because you know what? We're professional fakers.
Absolutely.
That's what we do. That's all we do is fake it. We're so inauthentic in most cases and have no idea who we are or what our values are, what principles to live by. It's all fake, and I just, I think just in the way that I hear that, it just feeds that idea of, just show up and pretend until it becomes real. and why not work your butt off until it becomes real? Why not do the work until it's there? Like, this idea of faking it just, again, seems to be a free pass for so many of us.
Sure. I watched a guy come into a meeting recently, and he was just, he was on his last bout of Suboxone. He was learning how to wean off that. He was having a real tough time. The guy was, he was co-addicted, and he just looked horrible. And he came in there day one, and he introduced himself, and he shared how he was feeling. And then he was there the next week, and he was there the next week, and I think about the third week, he had a sponsor. He was starting to work the steps, and today you could not recognize this guy. He was there no matter what, and he wanted it, man. And but that leads me to one that I'm not so sure of, and that is, you gotta want it to get it. I don't know that I buy that.
It's funny, that was going to be my next one too. So I'm glad we're on the same page there, because I think, and especially working as an interventionist, nobody that I meet on their first day of recovery wants recovery. Nobody wants it.
Nobody.
Like, when I'm sitting down with somebody and their family to talk about going to treatment or getting sober, the first response 99% of the time is absolutely not. There's no way I'm doing that, and this conversation needs to stop right now. And an hour or two later, as the conversation continues, we've gotten them to that point of willingness. But willingness and want, willingness and desire are two very, very different things. I think somebody has to be willing, but they don't have to want it. Like, all I knew at the time is that I was willing to do something else because I didn't want the life that I had before. And I think that's the starting point. It's just this idea that, what I'm doing isn't working. I don't know what I want. I don't know. Like, when I went to my first meeting, I wasn't sure I wanted to be sober. I didn't tell my family that I had gotten sober until I had 90 days.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want to get their hopes up that it was actually, I was worried that I might not stick with it. So why get their hopes up? And so, it's one of these things that, no, I don't think people have to want it. And I think that there's a number of externally motivating factors that get somebody into those rooms. It could be a judge. It could be, a medical condition. It could be a legal situation. Like, there's so many different, it could be the threat of divorce or, job loss. There's so many different things that get people's feet moving in that direction. It's the experience that somebody has once the process has started that creates that desire and that want to continue, I think. I have a hard time with that one.
Yeah. And this gentleman I was telling you about, you could tell that is not where he'd rather be that day. He'd rather be on a nice sunny beach. but
yeah.
He had the willingness that you were talking about. I would venture to say, and I may be wrong about this, but I have a suspicion that within the last 20, maybe even 30 years, most people that are in the 12-step rooms probably did not wake up one day and say, you know what, maybe going to a meeting is a good idea. I think that there was either a nudge of the judge, there was an intervention involved. Maybe they were introduced because it was what they went on for their daily walk when they were in treatment. Maybe the Looney Tooney bus came and picked them up. Whatever it was, or maybe they talked to a friend of theirs and their friend said, listen, I'm picking you up at noon and we're going to the noon meeting. But it wasn't something that they just desired to do. I don't know anybody that wakes up and goes, I think it would be a good idea to go to treatment today. Or I think it'd be a good idea to go to AA today. Without some pain that has motivated them. And,
I think that's true. I think pain is not that I'm looking for anybody to be punished into going into treatment, but I think just the natural consequences of what happens sometimes creates a pain that motivates us towards change. I've never met anybody that woke up with a refrigerator full of food and a loving spouse and and a great job, and the sun just shined every single day, and all of a sudden it's like, you know what, this really stinks. I think I'm going to get sober today.
Right.
Like,
right.
There's got to be some sort of, everybody gets an intervention, I guess, is what I would say. Whether it's a guy wearing a badge and a gun, whether it's a guy, with a stethoscope around his neck in an emergency room, whether it's a spouse or a boss, everybody gets an intervention. It's just, is that the last intervention we're going to have?
Right. Yeah. Do a step a month.
Oh my gosh! Really?
Yeah. Do a step a month.
I never heard that one.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Just do a step a month.
I'd like to punch that guy in the face.
Take it easy, brother. Take it easy on yourself. We're not in a big rush here. Just do a step a month. And in fact, this is December, so you don't even want to start until January.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Wow. If only.
Oh
if
my
only.
goodness
Yeah.
sakes. So you know what? I mean, if those are some of these things are the kind of things that you hear in a room where people are meeting dependent.
Yeah, I could see that.
And so what happens? Look if you had cancer, listeners, and hear me well. If you had cancer, and I said, hey, there is a treatment for your cancer. It is proven to work for people in the hopeless state that you're in. I got a ticket for you. We're flying to Arizona or New Mexico, and we're going to put you in the treatment program. The treatment for that cancer is not sitting in the waiting room with other cancer patients talking about your cancer. The treatment for that cancer is you see the doctor and you do what he says. And so this kind of runs into the meeting makers make it thing, which is hogwash too.
Yeah.
So do a step a month. If somebody's telling you that and you're buying into it, you might be dead before that month is out or the year is out. But I would run as far away as I could from that guy.
Yeah, I think I would too. That's just wild. It kind of goes along with I've heard a few times too, these guys that, when you ask them, hey, have you got a sponsor? Have you started working the steps yet? Yeah, I've got a sponsor. I'm taking myself through them. I'm doing the steps on my own. and it's like, well, really, where did that become a good idea? Like, this whole notion that, I can just kind of read this book and work through this on my own, and I don't need anybody, it's that fear of, at least what I make up about it is it's this fear of, I don't want to have to be vulnerable with somebody. I don't want to have to actually share my life with somebody and tell somebody, what's been going on. I think I'll just do this and do a self-assessment here and I'll be okay. I've heard plenty of guys in meetings that have do the whole self-sponsorship thing, and I think that's ridiculous.
Yeah. You got one yet, or you want me to keep going?
Keep going.
Okay. AA is a selfish program. What do you think?
Again, it just feeds one of the defects that we all have. I know how to be selfish.
Mm-hmm.
Now, don't get me wrong. I think plenty of us would rather get distracted working on somebody else's problems. I was one of those kinds of people. And I think, in many ways, that's why I end up doing the work that I do, is that there's something fulfilling about helping someone else. And in the past, I've definitely let my professional life distract me from my recovery. I work in this field, and it's easy after talking to families and talking recovery all day long to say, you know what? I really don't want to have another recovery conversation at all today. And I've done enough recovery work, and that's my professional life. But to tell somebody that it's a selfish program eliminates the need for fellowship. It eliminates the need for reaching out our hand to the newcomer. And that's a critical piece to all of this. I mean, the idea of the 12 steps, like you said in the beginning, is to create a relationship with a higher power that can help me solve my problem. But part of that process is that at some point in the future, my higher power is going to use me to help somebody else solve their problem.
You bet.
And I'm going to be a part of that spiritual experience if I will allow it to happen. And so I think that to tell somebody that it's selfish again, just gives us license to feed a defect.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because, again, some of these things that are said in the 12-step rooms come out of the mouths of people that have actually never read the literature and certainly haven't studied it to any degree. Because if you read all the way through the 4-step, it is all about, you only have one turn to talk about the other person, what they did to you. After that, it's all about looking at your side of the street, doing what you can do to repair that, and moving on into making amends for that without ever bringing up their part. So you get one chance, and that's in that first column. Other than that, are the first two columns. Other than that, it's self-awareness time. It's looking at your what Dr. Alan Berger calls your false self, and what the heck was going on, and getting in touch with your authentic self, and learning how to be a giver and not a taker. And
Now, having said that too, I will say that learning how to create healthy boundaries with people can sometimes feel selfish. Sometimes it feels like, well, I can't say no because then I'm not being of service. And there is a time and a place to say no. There is a time and a place for self-care, and boundaries are always healthy. And well, I shouldn't say that. Not all boundaries are healthy, but having healthy boundaries is always a good thing, I guess is a better way to say that. And sometimes to others that might look selfish. But, the more we do this work and the more we understand like where my work and your work can overlap, and it's still me working in my recovery and you working in your recovery, but it's not you working on my recovery or me working on yours.
Sure.
Do you know what I mean?
Sure. I sure do. So going back to people that don't read the literature, and I've been accused of being a big book thumper. My response to that is, how would you rather be thumped? Because you will be thumped.
Yeah.
But can you imagine taking an aviation ground school course and listening to the guy give the lecture, but you never open the flight school book? And at the end of the 3 weeks, you go out and they hand you a key to a Cessna 150. What's going to happen? You're probably not going to get off the ground if you do.
It's going to be a wild ride.
It's going to be a wild ride. So, I mean, come on, folks. The problem, I think, with this whole meeting-dependent thing is there are a lot of people, and I'm glad they're there, that are going to open meetings, which is open to anybody. There's no requirement for that. The public is welcome to come. And these 12 spiritual disciplines that we call the steps will work great for just about anybody. You don't have to be an alcoholic or a drug addict. But if you're bringing stuff into the closed, well, even some of the open meetings, and you're teaching some of these things to people that really are powerless, who really are addicted, you might just be, unbeknownst to you, killing somebody. And that really, really concerns me, which brings me to this one. Just don't drink and go to meetings.
No matter what.
No matter what. Yeah, don't drink
no matter what.
Okay. That's, thank you. Thank you as I pop the top on my Pabst Blue Ribbon.
Yeah. If I could just drink no matter what, I wouldn't be at a meeting.
Right.
Or if it's just as simple as just drink, don't drink and go to meetings. I mean, that might work for a while, but there's no new acquisition of tools that comes through experience.
Right.
It kind of goes back to the flight school analogy. It's like, I can sit and listen all I want, or I can watch YouTube videos on how to fly a plane. But until I have the stick in my hand and I'm actually on the runway,
right?
That's why, you have solo flights towards the end of your training as a pilot, because you need to have somebody there making sure you don't wreck that plane. And that's the whole need for sponsorship and somebody taking you through this work is to teach you these new tools and show you how to implement them in your life. Yeah, I mean, showing up is the first, is important. Like you want to be there, You know, you can't get the degree if you're not going to go to the classes. But you know, it's one of those things that you're missing out on a wonderful experience if that's all you're doing.
Yeah, amen.
There's
Amen.
better social clubs to attend if that's your intent.
Yes, yeah. I was watching an episode of Grey's Anatomy last night, and the former chief of the hospital, he's in AA, and he just blew up. He walked into this bar, and he saw the bartender collecting an AA coin from a customer and putting it in a big jar, and you get a free drink if you turn your AA coin in, right?
I've heard that before.
Yeah, and he lost it. He took a baseball bat to that whole bar. I'm telling you, you could pour all the booze down the drain you want to. It isn't going to stop me from drinking.
Yeah.
Here's one, and this is a misquote. And I get the meaning, and most people don't realize that it's a misquote because, again, they don't study the literature. Progress, not perfection. Now, that's not what it says. It says spiritual progress, not spiritual perfection. And what I hear with the progress, not perfection piece, with being taken out of context, is things like, I only live one day at a time. So I ask you, Matt, I go, hey, Matt, I need to move my couch tomorrow, and I've asked a bunch of people, and they're all busy. Would you be available to help me move my couch? And can we borrow your truck? Well, you know, I'm really not into that. It's progress, not perfection, and I just haven't learned how to, you know, say yes to things like that. Besides, I only live one day at a time, so I can't plan tomorrow.
Yeah. And, you know, in theory, I get it. Like, I don't have as big of an issue with this one as maybe I have with some of the other ones. It doesn't like push that button in me, but it's all about definitions. Like, okay, so what are you progressing towards? I mean, again, you could easily get me to go down a political rabbit hole about just about anything. But, you know, this whole idea of, you know, describing somebody's politics as progressive or describing, you know, anything as progressive, it's like, okay, what are you progressing towards?
Sure. Yeah.
You know, and you put it in this context. Okay, progress, not perfection. Okay, what's the goal? What are you progressing towards? And you know, if you have somebody who's a perfectionist who is constantly beating themselves up because they didn't get it just right, like that could be really
be useful. Yeah.
Advice to be able to say, hey, you know what? If you're trying to be perfect, bud, you're never going to get it. You're going to be disappointed every single time. Are you doing your best? Is the goal you're trying to reach? Are you getting closer? Are you making progress? That's one thing. But if I'm going to use this kind of like you did in your example of just like, you know what? I'm just not quite ready for that. My progress, you know, I'm just working on that. And, you know, I'll one of these days I'll be able to say yes, but that's not today.
Sure.
You know, I think, you know, we give ourselves so many outs. Like
we do.
We do that already. And like, there has to be some accountability. There has to be some expectation for change. But perfection can't be the benchmark. And I get that, but you know, don't cop out.
Yeah. Because most of the time when I hear that, it's an excuse for not being willing to do something. Well, it's progress, not perfection. You know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Sure, dude.
Yeah. I remember a time, this was early on, I remember thinking, this guy's nuts. But I remember this guy, you know, in one of his shares talked about how he had just been out and how he just cheated on his wife again. And now he was back in, you know, I'm back in AA. And I remember him saying, well, progress, not perfection. I'm thinking, really? Is that what? Is that it? Can I do that? Wow. Can I use that excuse? That sounds fun.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm in jail, but at least I'm not on death row. Wow.
I'm thinking about getting better, so you know, there's progress.
Yeah. Okay. Here's. I love this one. Just don't drink today. Tell yourself you'll drink tomorrow.
I mean, I get it. It kind of goes along with that whole one day at a time. Like, you know, there's times to stop thinking about the future. But man, there's a better way of saying that.
Yeah, isn't there? Because, I tell you what, all of Bill W.'s writings and Dr. Bob's, over and over again, they say, you must be done for good and for all. One day at a time did not come out of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that, it actually, if you really want to get down to it, it comes out of the book of Matthew, where it talks about, don't worry about today. Today has enough problems of its own. Tomorrow will take care of itself. In that context, yes. But to give yourself an out and say, well, I'll just drink tomorrow, I think that, I'll tell you, when I first heard that, I was an outpatient. And the counselor said, okay, just tell your brain you'll drink tomorrow and just don't drink today. And I tried that, and it didn't work.
Yeah.
It didn't work.
Well, it keeps that reservation alive.
That's
like,
just, that's it.
I reserve the right to drink at some point in the future.
Here's my reservation.
It keeps that notion alive.
Yeah, there's my reservation. My reservation was to keep a bottle of Corona in the back of my refrigerator, and along with a lime, just to remind me not to drink it. That was my reservation.
Well, yeah, it's like these old guys that I remember saying, well, when I quit smoking, I put a pack of cigarettes in my pocket, and I told myself, don't open it. I'm like, what? That's how you quit smoking, is with a full pack of cigarettes in your pocket, and you just willed yourself? Like, I cannot understand people that actually are successful that way. Like, that to me, that pack would have been gone by 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah. Okay, guy on your mind? I got more.
Yeah, run with it, because I'm
okay.
a little distracted, and obviously don't have my list in front of me. So,
all right, you can create God out of your own understanding. Now, the reason I bring this up is because, and then I'll let you comment on it. Again, that's not what it says. It says we turn our will and our life over to the care of God as we understand him, or as we understood him. That, in reading some of Bill's manuscripts, what he was saying there was, in fact, it originally was worded, turn as much of yourself as you understand over to as much of God as you understand. That's how it was originally worded, right? So that doesn't mean that you create God out of your understanding, because when you do that, you become the creator. And now we're right back where we started.
That's a good point. This reminds me of a conversation that I had with my first sponsor. When I first came into the rooms, I was an atheist. I had grown up in a home where there was a lot of religious and spiritual abuse. And it was easier for me to believe God out of existence than it was for me to actually reconcile that there was a God.
Sure.
And that God might exist in a different way than what I believed or what I was taught to believe. And my first sponsor was this Native American man, stayed quiet in meetings, like never said much. And I knew he'd been sober for a while. And, at the end of the meeting where, and anybody who's willing to sponsor, raise your hand. And I'm like, I could probably get away with a lot with this guy. That was my first thought with him. Like, he's not going to challenge me too much. Well, what I didn't know is that he was a deacon in a non-denominational church and had a really good relationship with God, and so here I am stepping right into the fire with this guy on this topic that I'd rather have a fist fight than talk to you about God. And, one of the things that he said to me, he said, Matt, whether you believe God is or isn't, doesn't matter one bit. It doesn't matter. Your beliefs don't hold that much power. Here's what I want you to think about. If there is a God, and you wanted a relationship with that God, who do you need to be?
Wow.
And that completely changed my conception around what spirituality is, because I felt like God had to show up for me a certain way. And it really helped me understand, like, if there is a God, and this God could be kind and loving and generous and everything that this man was telling me, how would I want to show up for that? and how, what's my part of the relationship need to look like in that? And it really put things in perspective for me. And this whole idea that, a God of our understanding, that somehow we get to create that.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think it, it makes us the director of our own show again.
Yeah.
And I think that, when we can really put that in its proper perspective and understand that there is an all-powerful being, whatever that conception is. And I want everybody to feel complete license to understand God as they want to, and need to, but yeah, we have no power in that.
Right.
Our beliefs hold no power in whether or not God exists or doesn't.
I think when we have the willingness to know Him, that He will in time reveal Himself. And I've seen it happen over and over again. And that whole idea of turning my will and my life over to the care of God as I understand Him, or more literally, as I am continuing in my understanding of Him, it's kind of like saying, on my way to 7-Eleven, I'm thinking about what is the soda pop as I'm walking to 7-Eleven. I'm not doubting that soda pop there. I'm just thinking about, how am I going to address this thing? Because I think as we continue in our understanding of Him, goes way beyond step 12. I think we're constantly doing that, and so I do know that the AA Big Book anyway does talk about any place is good enough to make a beginning, provided it makes sense to you. But the whole purpose of the 12 steps is to move on from there. When we get stuck in, God is the universe or God is the meetings, and that brings me to this one, God means group of drunks. I mean, I'm telling you, I tried turning my will and my life over to the people in that meeting. But then I found out they're all powerless, and I'm powerless.
Yeah.
So 0 + 0 was 0. And I started taking the advice of people that had opinions, but they weren't talking about the program. And it messed with me, man. It was not helpful.
Yeah. No, I hear that. And I think that, I don't want to call it pandering, but I guess that's what it is. We want to attract people into this program, and in this day and age, spirituality is sometimes seen as weakness, and even, I guess, back when the Big Book was written, it talks about how, it takes courage to, and I forget the exact language, but and you could probably help me with that, but there's, it talks about how all men of faith have courage.
Yes.
I think is the language that
You're right.
it uses. And it does take courage to admit that we are dependent on a power greater than ourselves, that we've never seen, that we've never had a real conversation with, like you and I are having right now, where I hear a voice talking back at me.
Yeah.
This is, it's this really, it's a very personal thing. And in this day and age, we look at that and say, who needs that anymore?
Right.
And to a guy like me who was burning his life down to the ground and couldn't find my way out. I mean, I couldn't find my backside with both hands in my back pockets at that point. Like, there is no way that I was going to find my way out of this on my own. And even today, like, you get people where the conversation can turn spiritual, and so many of us we'd rather not have that conversation unless we know it's safe.
Right.
Instead of being bold, and instead of, let me tell you about how, my higher power has saved me from my addiction. Is this a safe room to have that conversation in? Am I going to offend anyone by having this part of the conversation? I think that so many times we want to make the rooms safe for people who might be offended by that kind of talk. And instead of requiring that courage of them, like, come and join us, be courageous with us, and whatever you believe, that's fine, but just believe something, and whatever that's going to look like, join this courageous group with us.
I used to have a absolutely wasn't going to bend on this, because I'm a born again Bible believing Christian, and I wasn't going to sponsor anybody unless they were at least willing to have a relationship with Jesus Christ. They didn't have to have one, but they needed to be at least willing to. And my sponsor, he ripped me up one side and down the other. And I'm so glad he did. He says, you may be losing an opportunity there. He said, how dare you? And I was like, what? And he goes, and then he shared me an experience he had. And it ended up being an experience I would have several months down the road. I had a guy that came to me and asked me to be a sponsor. And we sat down and talked about matters of faith right away, because in the big book, it does right away. It says, we're going to talk about God. So we talked about God. And he claimed to be a Buddhist. I later found out that many people who claim to be Buddhist really don't know anything about Buddhism. And he was one of these guys. If you're one that really does, I'm not talking about you. And I said, okay, by the advice of my sponsor, I said, I'll just call him Dave. I said, Dave, what I'd like you to do, we got to the third step. You're turning your will and your life over to the care of the Buddhas, because there's many. Is that correct? He goes, yes. I go, then I expect you to know exactly what you believe. You have got to know it like the back of your hand, because you're giving your entire will, your personality, and your life, that's everything else, and you're turning it over to this higher power. That's a big order. So I expect you to learn about that. Well, he came back. It was several meetings, and he came back and he said, can you tell me more about yours? And I was able to share that with him without criticizing him at all, right? And he later on actually did turn his will and life over to Christ. But if I had said, I'm not going to sponsor you because you're a Buddhist, what a horrible thing to do, you know? And it was a learning experience that I cherish, and I'll never forget it.
Yeah,
there you go.
You know, maybe the guy was a devout Buddhist and knew everything about Buddhism, and goes on to be a wonderful husband and a wonderful father and a wonderful business, owner or employee, and has a fantastic life. Like,
success story.
Great. You are a part of that story too. Yeah,
yes, absolutely. Absolutely. If he had remained,
as a Christian man myself, like I get it. Like we want that for people, but before we save their soul, we got to save their life. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you can't see, you can't see.
Yeah.
And you're right. If he had continued on in his belief system that wasn't mine, we would still be friends. I'd still work with him. Yeah, I mean, why not? And I don't want to speak for Jesus, the man himself, but I think that's probably what he would do. So there you go on that one. Okay, we're almost out of time.
Yeah, I'm actually sitting in the cell phone lot at the airport now. I want to wrap up with you. I don't want to cut it short, but once we're done here, I'm going to return my rental car and hop on a flight.
Okay, my friend. I'll use this real short one. We talked about meeting makers make it. We could do a whole show on that one. But this one, I spilt more than you drank.
My bottom was worse than yours.
We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
We'll just leave it at that. Matt, thank you so much. Folks, don't forget to visit freedominterventions.com, partyrecordspodcast.com, and interventionsoncall.com, all with Matt Brown and friends. Say hi to Sam for us. We got to get him on this show, too. The three of you on here again.
Do.
Yeah.
And we do. Yeah, he and I are both. I know he's off somewhere in the country doing an intervention today, too. He has a separate business for his interventions. But, he and I do this podcast together. We love it. He's definitely the one you want to tune in to listen to. If you're going to listen to our podcast, you're not tuning in for me. Trust me. You're tuning in for Sam. That guy's he's got a golden voice. He's got one of these southern drawls that'll just rock you to
sleep. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Not that I want you to fall asleep listening to our podcast, but I'm saying he's a delight to listen to. So, if you like what Monty and I are doing, I think you'll equally like listening to Sam.
Okay, don't hang up. I got to upload this thing. Listeners, until our next broadcast, this is the Monty'man along with Matt Brown, and we are wishing God's perfect serenity for you. Bye-bye now.
This has been a broadcast of Take 12 Recovery Radio and KHLT Recovery Broadcasting.
Kitty, 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 kitty.
This has been a Chicken and a Pig production.